Hello and welcome to the aForm show. My name is Alan George and thank you very much for tuning in. Each week, we sit across from thought leaders and change makers in the architecture and design space of the GCC. We dive deep into their experiences, both professionally and personally, and share their valuable insight as to what makes them tick. Our goal is to add value to your day and help you navigate your own personal creative journey. Finally, the opinions and the views of the guest speakers are that of their own. They do not necessarily represent the views and the opinions of the show or the host. Welcome to the show, everyone. This week, we are joined by an architect and a researcher. Probably the first for this show, I believe. We are joined by none other than Eman Ismail Abdellatif. She specializes in the sound arts and its correlation to architecture. Needless to say, Eman comes up with a unique perspective on modern architecture. Her projects are centered around promoting values, identity, and culture, and enhancing the abilities of users using the built environment. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Good afternoon, Eman. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So for everyone who's heard the introduction, I'm sure that still sounds a bit vague and you don't fully understand what it is that Eman does. To be honest, I didn't initially as well, but the more our trusty intern Shweta told us about what it is that you do, I just got more and more fascinated into it. I think there's definitely a lot of research potential, as I'm sure you're going to tell us, and therefore a lot of impact for architects and designers in the field as well. So what I'm trying to kind of get us off with is for people who are not aware of the impact of sound arts in architecture and design, could you give us a brief snapshot as to what's the relation between the two and how did you stumble upon this area of research?
To say how I ended up with sound arts is a long process because I have been not researching, but actually exploring. It's more like not theoretical, but bumping between theoretical and practical. How the built environment is the major shaper of people, community in general, and how I have seen this actually literally through my work, and I also am able to do a character analysis of people through abstract art, so I can see exactly how the different built environments, according to social background, cognitive stage, and all this stuff, has been the major influencer, if we can say, on shaping the abilities of the user.
So, Eman, if you can give our listeners a brief snapshot on your research and its key findings, I'm pretty sure that would help a lot of our audience kind of get onto this journey that we're trying to take right now with this episode.
Okay, like I said, it's a journey more than a research, because it has been for more than 30 years now, but I will focus on the last journey, which is specifically integrating sound into the process. So in this specific research, I was focusing on what is the process using sound, music, symphony, and its dance that would enhance architectural building process for identity and shaping a good listener. I know that listening is the key factor for integrating and enhancing a lot of abilities, mental, physical, and psychological, to start a process for design that in which you feel who are you're designing for and feel the surroundings and all this. So this process was mainly, it aimed for this, and it was between 3 locations, Dubai, London, and Cairo, with a team that is made up of 3 architects and cinematologists and people who are researching in Arabian, because it was targeting the case study as Middle Eastern culture as my core thing. So there was this group in Egypt, there was the group in London, whom I integrated really with, the choreographer Agatha, and there was Peter also from Southampton. And in Berlin, there was Dr. Michael Fowler, who was sound artist and became a researcher integrating architecture with sound art. And there was my friend Mendoza, who was in University of Berlin. He's a sound installator now. The findings of this process, it had also, I made out of it like a sound music piece in which I reached like through analyzing motion, emotions, and of this culture, and taking the sounds through time with the music also. I made a piece in which should be the base for the process and was installed in Dilston Grove in London on 3 levels. Natural, which is the 0 ground level, secular, which is the human height, and like you can call spiritual level, which was usually in the alcoves in the church, with the speakers focusing on making the space literally speak with the piece. And then I was to analyze the motion of the audience and the choreographer with the piece and see how, in reflection to the emotions and motion related to this piece, how I should design for this culture Middle East. And this can be also taken as another level for any other culture or any other concept. The major findings also, I was using quantitative and qualitative methods in which it's not a personal opinion that metallic high-rise buildings are giving me a headache or I don't like them, or so. I proved it using infrasound recordings that the resultant from our composition, because of their proximity and vibrations, this is the amount of infrasound, and it was very different when it was vertical, or it was even concave, or it was embedded into a space. And this is the result when it's, even if there there is a crowd and there are very high traffic, still the infrasound was very low. If I have not defined infrasound is what we cannot hear. It's vibrations below 20 hertz, which we cannot hear, but excess of it harms our ability to focus, it gives us a headache, gives us mental and physical disturbance and insomnia and all these other things that we don't know what is causing it at times. And literally it is the cities that we are living in. The more and more modern it's becoming, the more and more it's influencing us. Yet traditional buildings, and I'm not saying let's go back to traditional buildings that are built with natural materials, do not produce this amount of infrasound at all. There's no comparison. Even when there is high traffic, even when there is a lot of noise, cluttering and all this stuff, you still don't get these infrasounds. I've even noticed that the colors, it's not just the colors, the forms, everything. There's also energy stored in the space because of the people. That's why when I'm talking about architecture, I'm talking about how much enthusiasm and love you are putting in the process of building it, and how much interaction with the people and the place and all this that leaves the energy stored, and the vibrations are reflected on the user of the space. And so it keeps on carrying on. It's not something that you are going to build and throw away. There are even architects who never go down and see what they are doing. They are surprised at the end, like, surprise, here is what you've done. They might not like it at all or whatever, but they don't even know the impact. When I build something, I stay even 2 years after I've built it, testing the behavior and doing lots of tests on the people and how it's impacting them. So one of the findings is that different forms and compositions of architecture, that architecture is literally like music pieces. I've also made research before about different genres of music. They do affect us in a different way. But unlike music, which is temporary, architecture, the impact is persistent. So before you draw a line, before you add a material, before you do all this, you have to be in the space. You have to feel again. As an architect, please try to feel again.
I think that every architect listening in agrees with that completely. I think it's something so basic, which for some reason tends to get missed out. And, like you said, many architects maybe don't realize the real world impact that they actually have with their projects and so on. And unfortunately, it is quite common practice that there are a lot of architects that never even visit whatever it is that they build. And I think you're completely right. I think that even for me personally, when I visit a new site, for example, I tend to normally just walk around by myself and kind of, how should I say this? Let the site talk to me and, kind of tell me what is it that, it wants and things like that. I know it sounds very abstract, but if people do that, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you totally should try it. I'm going to kind of get a bit more specific and ask you, Eman, what did you see or what happened that kind of gave you this interest in sound art to even start with? I mean, how did you kind of find this correlation between architecture and sound art?
It was mainly through readings first, theoretically, because I was searching how can I show that different compositions do have different impacts. I want people to stop telling me it's my personal opinion. So I was searching about microphones and recordings and who are linking between different arts and or feelings, because I was invited for CRISAP, their conference, in which I was talking about how I use sound as audio testimonies, and I was surprised how much sound artists have a lot to tell you as architects, and yet they are doing sound arts for the sake of sound arts, and they believe that sound art is just art, okay? It doesn't have to have a message. When I believe actually it makes you realize a lot of things. I was thinking, Pauline Oliveris is the one talking about deep listening. We are talking about another level of listening. Suddenly everything, you're in full power. You were blind before. You couldn't see, you couldn't feel. Okay, this process that she was talking about, and I had tried it when I was also in London before the course with Alex the Little. He was making a workshop and he was talking about spatial deep listening. And by the end of it, I could blindfolded, I could feel the dimensions and the vibrations in the space and the people around me and everything without needing to see at all. It's another thing.
Kind of heightens your senses almost.
It gets you embodied, really. You become part. You don't. I created something built on sound arts in which you make a dialogue, like what you say, with the environment. But you have to first really become the cells of the environment. That happens through the process of deep listening, in which you have to learn to listen to your own rhythm. There's a lot to say about rhythm and all this stuff. So sound art really is triggering so many potentials, and that as architects, honestly, I don't think really any of us has. And as architects, I believe we are just like any doctor, like any teacher. We are really influencing people to a very drastic measurement, and yet we are only considering winning projects and competitions and being famous and being on top of the list. And that's the last thing I want to do. I just want my message to get through.
Right. Okay. I almost then want to ask, have you had, because you said that you have these infrasound readings of these vertical metallic high-rise towers, for example. Have you also gotten readings, these infrasound readings from another type of typology or another building type wherein the sounds have been more favorable or preferred, for example?
I don't understand what you mean by favorable, but I told you I went into different architectural compositions, and the material, the forms, the surroundings, the colors, the relativity and the proximity between different types, and has impacted the amount of readings that I have made for infrasound. Yes, definitely they have. My other measurement tool was, I said, sensitive people, and I meant I was testing with a singer, a dancer, and a choreographer. The choreography is part of it, the first part of it, which is to feel the environment really and become digested in the surrounding and move with it. So the choreographer, when I took her to traditional buildings, she was flowing with the space as if she was totally free, and the details of her motion and interaction were giving me readings and insights in which just the infrasound does not tell you as much, because you could see exactly. And her feedback, she had a lot of feedback, what she felt and why was she moving this way. I also tried getting a piece of music from our culture, the Middle Eastern culture, and making her in a free space move with it. And amazingly, she never had belly dancing lessons or everything, and she was perfect, because it takes you feeling, it takes you to be a sensitive person who can feel to move with it.
Right. No, I think that's very interesting. I think a lot of people have not been able to articulate what you have been speaking about. I think everyone feels it, but haven't maybe understood why that's happening. And worst case, as designers, are not even aware of how they can make it better. So I'm curious then, I think off air you were kind of just starting to tell us about how you may be putting all of this research or material that you found into some kind of a book or something like that. If you could maybe tell our listeners a bit more about that as well.
In this book, actually, I'm targeting everybody, in which I am discussing that the physical environment is like musical compositions and sound, but in a more persistent way. And I'm showing the people the different impact of different environments and how to design the built environment so that it enhances listeners, so that they become good architects or just good human beings who can integrate all their sensors later on and perceptions and link and all these things. So it starts with us as architects shaping for listening, understanding, and you will know how to do it. And I did reach criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, like design criteria is how to design the built environment for listening. And it's at the end proposing a process in which I have integrated the visual musical abstraction process with the listening and all this, how to design through sound, for sound, and with sound.
Very cool.
And it's called listening to the dance of the built environment.
Dance the built environment. I like that. That's a pretty cool name. All right. Definitely a lot to unpack in this episode for sure. Eman, if any of our listeners want to get in touch with you or want to know more about infrasounds and how they can learn to be more sensitive and more open and listen more and anything, if they want to get in touch with you, see your work, look at your research, for example, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You'd find me on Instagram, Eman, EMAN Ismail, ISMAIL.90. Okay, and my LinkedIn, I don't remember what is the LinkedIn, but it's Eman Ismail Abdellatif there.
So contact information down. Eman, thank you so much for giving us your time today. Definitely a lot to think about. And for all the architects and designers listening, a lot of takeaways as well. Once again, on behalf of Shweta, Jasim, and myself, thank you so much for giving us your time. And for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormers, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being part of our journey, and thank you for the immense support we've been receiving for our episodes. It has and continues to be a very bumpy road, but we wouldn't want it any other way. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought you value, please share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. But of course, if you loved the episode, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, send us a little DM, and we may just send you a secret link to a secret episode which we've been working on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See you next time. Keep sketching.